think we'll get started. We're 3 minutes in. Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you to everyone who joined last week. The session last week got a lot of really good feedback from a lot of different people from the community. My expectation that it was that it would be more of a sort of newbie indexer clinic, but it turned into more of what I would call a forum of sorts for people to talk about important things going on in the community. For the moment, I'm not changing the theme away from the initial objective, which is to help indexers that have any specific issues. But I'm also not going to in any way inhibit the really useful conversations that have been going on. We are formalizing the recording of these sessions from now on. Alex, Indexer Payne, is recording the sessions, and we'll put them out with transcripts or minutes later on if there's anything that's important enough that we need to have an action on. So beware, if there's something you've got a strong opinion on and you have some ideas and you come up with it on this call, you might find your name beside an action. But I just want to emphasize that we, for now, will continue to honor the questions in the chat first. And then I have a list of stuff that's sort of, pertinent topics that have been coming up over the last week or so that would be interesting to get everybody's opinion on. And then we can open up towards the end if anyone has any additional specific things they'd like to talk about. So our first question today comes from Steak Machine, and he's asking about OpenZFS and whether it's worth using OpenZFS. So I guess the first question is, who is using? Anyone here is using ZFS? I'm using it. Really? Just me?
That's what I expected.
You might find your name next to an action item, Jim.
It seemed like it, yeah. But I already put a sort of a wall of text about my opinions on ZFS into chat a while ago. Just so I'm not going to spend a massive amount of time on it. But I would say if you're starting from fresh with a new deployment and you're trying to move towards a hyper-converged type architecture where you have one unified storage layer for all your servers or containers, or even if you have just a couple of servers and you want to have a sort of well-pooled resources per server, ZFS is a really good shout, because everything on ZFS is sort of one layer up from the disk. It's up at the file system level. So when you deal with configuration, it's virtual devices that if you're a Linux person, you know what I mean. It's the virtual devices are what you're using to manage your pools. You can do compression, which is really cool. You can tweak your performance on the pool depending on the load you're putting in there. So if you have a Postgres database, you can do tweaking on the types of data that are coming in and out of your database and tweak the block size so that you're getting the most performance you can out of the array. And then you have snapshots as well. Snapshots are a really powerful way of sort of doing either asynchronous backups, or potentially you can also do sort of long-term backups with snapshots, but most people tend to do short-term stuff with snapshots on ZFS. So if you're looking to, if someone's interested in OpenZFS, I would say if it's a new deployment, go for it. If you've got an existing deployment, dedicate a few disks to it and try it out for yourself. Some caveats. Recently, TurboGeth put out some benchmarks for using ZFS to sync TurboGeth. And unfortunately, they found that with just the default block size, 128 kilobytes, the performance is almost halved in terms of the time it takes to do the full sync. And similarly, if you use compression, you get the same level of performance. That's not to say that you couldn't fix that, but it's just a warning. It's okay to just deploy ZFS by default, but if you are going to deploy it, especially in something like the graph, you need to be thinking about how you're going to make it as performant as possible with your database. And that could be not just about tweaking it; it's also about spending the right amount of money on the hardware itself.
What's the advantage of ZFS over LVM?
Flexibility. You can span ZFS pools across multiple servers if you want to, especially if you're using something like a hypervisor rather than bare metal. I don't know if you're familiar with Gluster. It's a way of clustering ZFS pools. It's all really the benefit is the flexibility of being able to do things on the fly, and then also the sort of the new types of RAID that you can use with ZFS, which sort of they can save you money in the long term. But again, another caveat with ZFS is depending on how you set up the arrays, it can cost you more in upfront costs. So your capex for the disks, if you want to set up a really big ZFS array. All right, is that enough nerding out on ZFS? Nobody has any other questions about ZFS? What else do we have here? Upgrade plan. Okay, so the node upgrade plan was actually on my list of things, like the top of my list of things that I was hoping that we could discuss as a group. I think there are some initiatives coming down the line in the form of grants that will sort of help secure ETH node features into the future for graph indexing, but we're not there yet, right? So we need to work as a group to make sure that, you know, in the immediate, we're ready for the Berlin hard fork. And then in the sort of mid to long term, we need to be looking at all, you know, additional clients that would have the features that we need in order to support the most complex subgraphs. So archive with tracing, with trace filters. So I want to open up this discussion to anyone who wants to talk about it. I'd be interested to know what people are doing to prepare for the Berlin hard fork right now.
Personally, I'm syncing an OpenEthereum 3.1 node, hoping that there's an easy migration path to 3.2 when it comes out.
That's basically what I'm doing as well, while still running 301 on the side for now. Not that it's actually required for mainnet yet.
Has anybody tried? I understand that there is an unofficial or unrecommended upgrade path between 301 and 3.1. Has anybody tried that?
Yeah, I tried that. And I didn't have major problems with it. Like, it's basically just converting the database to the 2.5 format. And then, yeah, run some bug fixes on top, I think. I think it's basically 3.5.13.
And that's with official releases, right, Goldberg? It's not anything custom that you've done.
I don't remember if there was a tool to convert the databases.
I think they did
Maybe
release
it's
one.
included. Yeah, I think that I think I had to do this first, and then I could start the new version.
So is anybody else doing the same thing? I haven't actually started, but because I don't have the capacity, the storage capacity right now, but I need to.
Here's one thing I want to add. It was surprisingly quick. Like, you know, if you fucked up your archive node database in less than 5 seconds.
Right, okay, so you're saying with a 301 database, trying to do the upgrade, or sorry, yes, the conversion.
No, with any database, from 3.0 and from 2.5.13, you can upgrade to this 3.1. And I think any conversion, it's just like rewriting some headers or some shit. It's not actually touching the data. You don't need more space or whatever. You just run it over the existing folder, and it's done in 5 seconds.
Does that work with 301? That's what most people are running, to my knowledge.
It will work with 301.
Okay, good to know. So I guess that's where we all need to be. I think it's April. Is it early April for the for Berlin on mainnet?
I just checked. They said mid-April.
Mid-April for Berlin on mainnet, and I guess all the test nets prior. one of the test nets must be coming up soon then.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but there was, yeah, I think it was in 2 or 3 weeks, the first testnet.
Yeah, in March, I think. And then all throughout March will be like testnet after testnet, and then lastly will be the mainnet release.
So is there work here for us to do on Rinkeby then? For testnet use? For our graph testnet?
Yeah, I think so. Well,
It's
not
simpler
so
though,
much
right?
work, but yeah, like, you know, there's the opportunity to test Berlin clients on Rinkeby in the context of indexing prior to mainnet.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I better get my button gear and get that replication of my 301 sorted out. I don't know about anyone else, but I buy my servers outright, and then right now it's an absolute nightmare trying to get hold of the servers that I need to get my hands on because of this chip shortage. It's just a total nightmare.
Yeah, we can't even rent them.
Hey, well, I got an email from Hetzner that after 2 weeks they gave me that server, the new one, AX101.
Finally.
I just ordered a Epic server today, and they said it's going to turn up in 1 to 2 days after we pay, which is kind of surprising because, yeah, I've seen the same shortages elsewhere. I'm not holding them to it because I don't actually expect it to materialize.
Yeah, I mean, I found a few sort of refurbished enterprise server sellers here in the UK that have got Epic stuff available, but they're already jacking up their prices because they know they can, and it's quite egregious at this point. Even if you were to go back as far as like workstation processors, which I used a lot historically, you know, like the top level Threadrippers, if you can find them, you're paying, you know, 30% more than retail. It's just ridiculous. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Are there any ARM chips on the horizon yet?
What's
Any what?
Any ARM chips now that notebooks get ARM processors? Why not servers?
You can buy ARM servers, like with huge number of actual physical cores. I think they use them quite a lot in switching equipment as well. A lot of Cisco equipment has got ARM.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the level 1 type stuff that does all the really heavy lifting has got ARM stuff in it.
You can also get a Raspberry Pi on EcoOla for rent.
Yeah, let's run Graph on Raspberry Pi. Let's do that.
You're
An
not.
area of Raspberry Pi.
Somebody actually, I think somebody at some point in the chat was talking about trying that out. At least putting certain parts of it, or trying to compile certain parts, the indexer components on a Raspberry Pi.
No, he just asked, didn't start compiling, I think. He was told not to try it anyway.
This next question is probably one for maybe you, Pen. If you use any data centers except for Hetzner. Personally, I don't do dedicated, so I don't know what State Machine's talking about, whether he's talking about Dedi or VPS. For BPS, I use, when I need it, I use Hetzner and DigitalOcean, bare metal. Yeah, I'm not sure DigitalOcean do bare metal.
We used some Vulture thingy, I don't know how it was called, Goldberg during the testnet, and also for cloud computing we used Linode. But
I
we're
tried
currently...
them all. I tried everything. I had to say that Linode and I forgot the other one. They had
Contabo?
the best disks. Not Contabo. No, these
Okay.
VPS, they had
No.
very slow SSDs most of the time, and Linode
Right.
was okay, but also not in all data centers.
No,
Yeah,
the
I was
rule
about
of
to say,
The worst one was Google Cloud, like in terms of IOPS on the storage.
yeah, I was going to say, I've had some experience in recent years with Contabo, and I can't recommend them.
yeah, just run as far away as you can from them.
think there's a lot of people trying Contabo in the early days of Mission Control, finding that, it was no good.
The other really good VPS was Hetzner, actually, but that's where we all want to get away from.
Right. So it looks like we're out of questions from the chat. So we can move on to some of the other stuff. So the first thing that I had up was around the upgrade pass for Berlin. So we've had a brief discussion about that. The next thing on the list is something that I've been talking with lots of different people about. So wanted to get a sort of discussion going on the topic of staking centralizations, because there's sort of a trend that we've watched grow slowly, then quickly over the last month or so, around very large stakes coming into the system and taking up a large portion of the total stake, and therefore the total capacity to do things like serve queries on the network. So Gary, I know you're working on something. I'd be interested to get your thoughts. If you want to introduce the beginnings of your proposal, talk about it a bit.
Yeah, so basically, like Jim says, we've been witnessing a lot of the stake moving to very few indexes on the network, and I suppose there can be a variety of reasons for this, whether it's the size of their stake enticing people, low cuts, maybe in some cases it's their brand. There's some recognized and well-respected validators at the top of the stake weight charts, I guess you would call it. But we're basically seeing a lot of the stakes centralize the same few parties right now. Well, actually, I started writing a proposal on this. I was planning on doing it next week, but it seems like the issue is getting more and more critical in a very short space of time. We even saw yesterday that Framework Labs now have an indexer up, which already accounts for almost 11% of the network. Before they came along yesterday, you could even see, about 25% of the delegation weight of the network is sitting on one single indexer, and roughly 50%, I think, was spread between 3 to 5 of them. Obviously, this is all like moving, and it depends on the context of when you're actually making this proposal. But for the sake of my proposal, I was kind of leaving a couple of the more recent additions to the network out of this. But to get to the point, what myself and a lot of others who have been discussing this stuff with think is some of the root causes of this are the current delegation ratio being at 16 times and there being no over delegation cap. And we still need to model out a lot of this stuff. We've been over a lot of numbers, but we need to make a proposal for this so that people can discuss it, and then we can model things maybe a bit more with a bit more input from other people. Because the way we're actually thinking about it with the people I've discussed it with is it might be in the network's best benefit if we implement a hard cap. What that hard cap may be, we're not entirely sure yet, and the delegation ratio may be tweaked. Our initial idea was to just lower the delegation ratio, but this doesn't stop someone just culminating a huge amount of stake and running, an indexer that could just wipe up like a quarter of the network on its own. We already see this. Framework Labs 2.24 billion capacity. We're talking 22% of the entire supply, and when you consider that the entire supply isn't even going to be locked in stake, that makes the issue even worse. So what we are going to initially propose for discussion is a hard cap and then a revision of both the delegation ratio and the ability to over delegate either in part or at all. Because personally, I feel that I understand why this was implemented, and I've heard some members of the Edge and Node / Graph team talk about this, and I understand the idea behind it was free market principles, but in reality, I don't think it's actually got an upside for the network itself. So, any thoughts on that before I waffle on too much?
Juan, are you able to speak? or are you at work?
It's probably just listening.
I think one potential like undesired outcome of dropping the delegation would kind of delegation cap ratio, whatever it's called, is that it essentially decreases the potential like stake weighted power of smaller indexes just as much as it does larger ones, and you know, reduces the ability for smaller indexes to compete.
Yeah. See, this is what I was saying. Initially, we thought maybe lowering the delegation cap is the answer to this, but since thinking about it further, what the current thinking between myself and the people I've been talking to is a hard cap plus a review, not necessarily a reduction of the delegation ratio. You could even increase this to push a little more weight towards smaller indexes. Like, for instance, the numbers I'm probably going to put in the initial proposal would be, let's just settle on these so that we can have a discussion just based on something solid. 200 million as a hard cap and 20x as a ratio.
So you basically either hit the ratio cap or the hard
Yeah,
cap.
whichever's lower. Sorry,
Mhm.
whichever's lower.
Yeah, so basically you would have like any indexer that goes over 10 million on its own stake won't really benefit much because it will reach the hard cap, but smaller indexers will have like, instead of 16x, 20x to basically work with.
That's really interesting.
I think it may have been Ford who posted some follow-up comments in the Indexes channel that I thought was that were astute comments. And like, you know, the counter argument is that, you know, like that's, you just cause larger indexes to split up their stake and run multiple indexing addresses. Like it,
You know,
you make things slightly more difficult, but
No, it's a huge improvement. Look, so first of all, you have to pay more times in gas than just running a single indexer, and that's a significant margin, because like if you have in mind that sometime in the future there'll be like 100 subgraphs in the network that you have to allocate towards if you want to get the full 3% inflation rate stuff, that means you will have to pay, I don't know, $20,000 to $30,000 each month for each indexer that you have, only to allocate once per month. And
yeah, that's true. You're right. Like the operational cost scaling and in terms of gas, yeah,
Yeah, it takes a while to you know, go over every aspect and implication of this, and yeah, that's one of the things I kind of missed out. I've got it in the proposal that I've been writing up, but it's one of those things you've really got to think about, you know, all the moving pieces, and we just kind of witnessed you do that in slow motion of realization.
And there's
So that's
also
where modeling comes into play, right? So we need some way to model this, right? It's like a sliding scale of all the different variables and how it might affect the network, how stake might move around the network.
there's also the case, Jim, let me just say this before I forget. There's also the case that most of us have lock token wallets, and they can't be like split into multiple indexers. There's only one indexer per account for the time they're locked, so that's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, this is more thinking about, you know, long-term future rather than the implications of being on a token lock and how that might impact some of these larger current stakes that it would affect. That's something I haven't even gone into because I'm trying to consider the majority over the minority.
Fair enough.
But the thing is that when these big stakes also cannot split to multiple indexers, then they are basically forced to delegate, which would really benefit the decentralization of the network.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping this would have, basically a trickle-down effect to varying degrees of everyone below the top, 5, 10, wherever it's centralizing to currently.
Yeah, basically the issue is like if one indexer can basically have 100% of the circulating supply for delegations, that's not good. So it's not like we want to basically handicap 100% of their stake, but at least make it a little bit difficult to access all these like 2.2 billion delegation cap. They could probably do it long term, but they would need to spend a lot more ETH costs basically.
Yeah, the idea is that it scales with basically diminishing returns against how much they want to effort and cost in gas, etc., that they want to put into running an indexer, just rather than allocating some of their own stake, if they have that much of it, towards delegating on the network themselves, because it'll get to a point where it's not really feasible for them to just spin up indexer number 5, 6, etc. And obviously then that could be delegated further on the network.
Exactly.
Sounds great.
Gary, have you already written down a proposal, or is it just an idea right now?
I've written up a proposal. I've just handed it around a few different people to have a look over and see what they think of it before I actually put it on the forums. But I was possibly going to post it after this call, after we have a kind of discussion in here.
Oh, right. This sounds great.
Is this,
because I would love to read it at the forum, so if it's live,
Hmm.
I think it's going to be interesting for many people.
I remember that I picked up somewhere that the current development in the GraphNode software goes in the direction that you can more easily run clusters somehow, that you maybe provide multiple gateway endpoints, and
Yeah.
you split the computation across multiple machines. That actually sounds like currently the development goes in the direction to put those 2 billion staked nodes in the position to actually also perform, because before everything had to run on one machine, and it was not really feasible to think that they would be able to carry 20% of the network load.
The main aim isn't to cripple large holders in any way. It's to give everyone below the top handful a better fighting chance and a chance to get more delegation. I mean, when I look at this and I see that some of these guys can already take on 2 billion of capacity, what is the purpose of that for the network when the network has 10 billion in supply? There's absolutely zero need that should be even possible, in my opinion. And it's the same with over delegation. I understand why it was implemented and kind of left as somewhat of an experiment, but it doesn't benefit delegators, and it doesn't really benefit the network, because past the point of dilution, delegators aren't gaining anything, and then that delegation is just centralizing further for not really any purpose.
Yeah, I mean, that's the end goal here, right? At least in my eyes, is that we're all here for various reasons, but one of those reasons is that we're trying to build a decentralized network, right? Not a network that sits between 3 mega whales. Otherwise, really, what's the point? Ford, are you with us? I'd be interested to hear if this is something that's talked internally at EdgeNode, if you have anything to add to the conversation.
Hey guys, yeah, I've been listening in. We haven't gone too detailed in talks about this recently, but based on your conversation, I do have a few things I'd like to point out. One is that if anyone has the time over the next week or two, along with this proposal, it'd be nice to have some models of example business models for a large indexer, and then what the potential effect would be if they had to split into, say, 5 indexers or 4. And one thing I'm thinking about is what percent cut change would they have to do to compensate for the increase in ETH costs? And is that something that would actually have a long-term, hugely detrimental effect on their business? It's not clear to me without actually looking at those numbers.
Yeah, it's a good point. We have been having some discussions actually as well about the gas costs and what that might look like per 30, 40 subgraphs for every.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, we actually, Jim mentioned it earlier. We remember Brandon said that you guys were modeling some stuff internally before Mainnet, and we were wondering if you maybe still had some kind of pre-made models that we could base it on something that's already familiar to you guys.
Yeah, that's something that I can look at this week. We have some models. I think most of them weren't driven towards individual indexers' business model and more of like a higher level view, but I will loop back on those and let you guys know if we have something that could be useful there.
Okay.
The other thing is that with the over delegation, there's certainly a lot we could talk about there, but one thing that comes to mind is say a situation where most indexers have full delegation capacity. What's the desired next steps? Like, do we want to allow more delegators to come in, even though that pool would be considered technically over delegated? They can still make money doing that. Something to think about.
Yeah, the problem is that, especially on these large stakes, it's actually currently very profitable. Even if you went, say, on P2P right now, and you started getting them 10%, 20% over allocated, their APY would still, blow the majority of indexers out of the water simply because they've got such a huge pit of over delegation for you to sink into before you get that kind of diluted effect on their APY.
Yeah, and the amount of GRT that they handle basically allows them to offset every operational cost that they may have.
Yeah, because they still have probably somewhat the same linear costs as many other people, at least as far as things like gas go, but just the scale that they're operating at is just, you can't compete with this.
Yeah, I see your point. I totally agree. And I think that, this warrants a lot more discussion and investigation, but it seems that there will be needed some sort of combination of a social and technical solution with, education in the community around the values of decentralization, as well as, potentially some sort of hard cap on stake and maybe adjustments to the delegation capacity.
Yeah.
I don't think people really care about being educated, just because, like, if you look at the number of people that are delegated to P2P, for example, they have over 2,000 delegators in, and the network has 5,000. So almost half of the network is delegated to them.
Education's obviously still important, but I feel like just the impact that these current parameters have is actually steering a lot of decisions, because a lot of decisions, like it or not, are based around APY. And if you're one of these big outfits with a very large bag, then you can offer you can offer a low APY, you can fill up very early while nobody else is really getting a look in, and you can continue to offer that same kind of level of APY, even if you start pouring into, dilution with over delegation. That's what I know a lot of us would like to see us move away from, because I don't see it getting much better in the short term, and I'm a bit hesitant about the how it looks in the long term, honestly.
Yeah, I would love to have more data, especially around queries. One thing that's important is that larger stake means you have more at risk in your indexing, proof of indexing, and your query responses. And it's yet to be seen whether these large indexers can find ways to have query volume that is on par with their staking volume on the network, and what effect that will have. So, as you all know, there's lots of changes in the next few months that will be happening.
The big problem. Sorry, Gary, go on.
I was going to say, I understand that side of it as well, but for us to get to the point where query income is going to eclipse reward income, that's still quite a long path for us to travel. And I'm kind of worried of what's going to happen to the network in the meantime if people really can't compete and just decide it's not really worth their time to index, so they might as well delegate instead.
It seems to me that this is actually more. I mean, I don't have the GIP process in front of me, but this is almost prior work to a proposal, Gary, almost, where you're saying, here's an idea. I don't know which of these are the option. We need help from, everybody in the community to try and model this and look at what the possible options are. Then from that data, you then make a proposal.
Oh yeah, this was all just like even when I said I was thinking of posting it this week, that it's more about getting the conversation started and highlighting the issue. The issue's already quite apparent to me personally, but there's no point talking about it further down the line if we can start talking about it and thinking about it and planning around this now.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the language on the forum, right? Because people see proposal, they think, okay, well, that whatever's being proposed is it. I'm saying no to that because I don't agree with it, rather than having an open and honest conversation about what the actual solution is, right? That's some of what I see when I look at the behavior within these proposal threads we've had in the last couple of weeks. People are they're only focusing on the solution that the original poster puts out there, and they're not thinking about, okay, well, maybe I don't think that will work, but here's another idea that might work, right?
I'll trim. I had my own suggestions, like the numbers I've mentioned in this call, but yeah, now you mention it, I'll trim them out from the OP, as it were, and put it as my personal opinion below.
Yeah. So are you posting that today?
I mean, tomorrow? I could do. I mean, we could wait for more models, but we don't necessarily need all of the data just to have start a conversation, and we might even see people involved who actually want to help model out that data or add their thoughts to it, because it doesn't matter what we come up with, because we can even go back to when MainNet launched. Yeah, I think it was like the first day of MainNet launching. I was actually on the complete other side of the fence. I wrote in the chat, and I think it was Dev who responded to me. I said, are you sure about a 16x ratio? Because I don't know if this is going to be enough for, I don't think we're going to have enough indexes for what Ford was getting at. What happens when all the indexes are full, as it were. I didn't think 16x is going to be enough, really. But now we're up to 170 indexes. It's clearly more than enough. And some of these stakes with the 16x against them, we're seeing, we could delegate the entire network a few times over. So yeah, I was kind of on the opposite side of the fence at the beginning, but as we've seen it progress over the past couple of months, it's headed in the complete opposite way. So whatever models we come up with, I don't think they're actually going to be reality. It's just going to be a case of putting the hive mind together with how we expect behaviors to play out.
Yeah, it's about trying to find the edge cases. Exactly the process that Chris went through when you first introduced the idea, right? Talking through it, but formalizing the models. And the reason I'm suggesting that, this is like a pre-proposal is for the very thing you said. This is a profound sort of network parameter change, right? If we can get more input from more people who are good at modeling, then all the better.
Yeah. I think even Juan could put his useful 2 cents in there. He seems good with the numbers and the charts.
Yeah, I'll have to play around with the numbers to make sure we could still get at least half of the total supply within delegations. If we reduce the cap for the big indexers, you will basically possibly get into a situation where you don't have enough room for all delegators to basically come in and delegate, which would be really bad. So yeah, it's really difficult, but we have to balance it out before the proposal.
Yeah, the thing is, if something like this isn't done sooner rather than later, I expect you're going to see a reduction in the amount of indexes, and then you kind of head towards that problem already. But obviously, we don't have that problem with the current ratio. So it's better if something like this happens sooner than later, in my opinion, so that you actually have a healthy network with profitable operational delegate indexes of all sizes.
Yeah, also the small indexers will be the first to stop indexing and start delegating, and mostly like most indexers are below 3 million GRT, which I would consider like medium size or like small indexers compared to like 140 million indexers, right? So it really becomes quite problematic quite fast.
Yeah, there's only 8 of the 170 that are even above 4 million at the moment.
Yeah.
Juan, can you address? I see you're addressing a conversation in chat with Nilai. Can you bring that up onto the audio?
Yeah. So basically, one of the possible situations would be to like have a kind of hybrid delegation cap, in which you would have the ratio implementation, 16x, 20x, 5x, whatever the number that might be, and you will have like a hard cap. So let's say 200 million would be the hard cap. So only like 10 million in a 20x scenario for the ratio, only 10 million own stake delegators would be affected by this hard cap, which are only like 5 indexers, I mean. So like you could play around with this basic proposal to get a couple of different scenarios where you could like bump indexers with low stake so that they can have more delegators and thus make a little bit more money, since low-end indexers, especially with the current gas prices, are really affected in basically almost any scenario to index. Like there's no reason to index with 100k GRT, right? It only really becomes profitable when you go above 1 million, and we could actually bump that so that the ratio increases, but you set a hard cap so that there's no risk of centralization. It could be like 100 million, 500 million, like the hard cap, and you could still have really large nodes, but you wouldn't risk like having nodes that could basically get like 5 billion or 2 billion delegations, which is 100% of the current circulating supply among delegators.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I interrupted somebody else who wanted to talk there before we talked, Juan, whoever that was. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that one thing I forgot to mention was that we have an engagement that's just started with a team that's going to be modeling specifically the delegation market and presenting proposals for updates, as well as just characterizing it. So I think that might take a little bit, like maybe 2 weeks from now we'll have our first results from that, but that's going to be an interesting input once this conversation has started on the forum.
Definitely, that sounds very interesting. I think you mentioned that last week, Board, as well. Okay, we've got 15 minutes left. Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up around this proposal / pre-proposal? Gary?
Nope. I've said everything. Like I say, I suppose I can just get ahead and post this up and get some more feeling of the room, as it were.
Okay, cool. I want to bring up another question before we go to sort of opening things up to anybody to pose something for discussion. It's another thing that obviously, as Ethereum starts to become way more congested and way more popular this last few months, gas is becoming more and more of a sort of a cost line item for us as indexers. So interested to know how, probably it's pretty obvious how people feel about this, but how are people thinking about being efficient with their gas costs as we stand today, and who's thinking about layer 2 and how that might actually possibly be a solution to these problems for the protocol itself? Chris, I'd like to start with you because I'm aware that you have a grant for optimizing the agent gas efficiency.
Yeah, so that's something I've been working on a bit. Is a fork of Indexer Agent, and Yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount of surface area of indexer agent that can be optimized and kind of, make much, just be more considerate about gas consumption. There are a number of contract calls that the indexer agent isn't currently using. I've already implemented close and allocate, which by my measure nets about a 10% net gas savings versus doing two separate transactions. And at least the way that I have been managing my allocations is I kind of separately have done a bit of work on indexer agent to implement things like gas price caps so that you can be a little bit more assertive about how much gas indexer agent can spend. And so what that meant for me before was I kind of, submit a closure, need to wait some period of time for that closure to go through, and then, put the kind of next allocation call in. And so there's the potential for a few hours if if you get caught at the wrong time of day or something where, your stake isn't allocated. So that's another kind of great benefit of rolling that into a single transaction is, that there's zero time risk. You're always completely allocated. Part of the modifications I've made already also mean that indexer agent will automatically increase the size of the allocation based on the rewards earned within the prior allocation. So just a bit smarter kind of treasury management. There's still lots of other optimizations that can be made, and I'm hoping that the Graph Foundation can fund some of that work. The real solution you alluded to, which is layer 2.
Yeah, so Alex, I know this is top of your mind because Alex has said, because you guys run multiple indexers. So what are your thoughts on where we are and where we need to go?
To be quite honest with you, I think if we don't do anything about gas costs, the small indexers will get blown out as soon as more subgraphs get added, because the operation costs scale up linearly. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you think there is room for indexers with a modest number of subgraphs in order to maintain lower gas costs?
No, the problem is that if you don't allocate to all of the subgraphs that have a signal on top of them, you won't get close to the APY of like a mega indexer that doesn't care about the gas cost and just operates at maximum capacity.
Got it. That's a good point.
And their delegators will move on from them to like bigger indexers just because they have the ability to allocate without any constraints. It doesn't matter if the gas is 800 grade, they just do it because they have money.
This is a huge factor. Like the fact that the fact that costs scale linearly with an increase in the number of subgraphs, but those costs are have to be borne by all indexes irrespective of their income level. In and of itself, that drives stake centralization.
Indeed. That was my point.
Yeah. So layer 2 is definitely something we need, and I have been doing a fair amount of research and deep diving on layer 2, so I'm happy to talk a bit about that if anyone's interested, and not in the context of the graph, but just more generally the options, pros, cons, trade-offs, and so on.
Yeah, I think maybe, Chris, that would be good next week. I've got a couple of things sort of planned for next week with a couple of people, if you are interested, and that might be something worth spending maybe even half of a session on, because it's a big area right now, a big area of growth. I'd be really keen to hear what your research is for in terms of knowledge around that area in more depth. 10 minutes ain't enough type of thing.
Sure, happy to contribute next time.
Awesome.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And again, I wanted to see if Ford has any input here. You know, is this something that is in the research stage in Edge and Node? Because obviously this is cutting edge stuff, right? So you need the engineers that can work on cutting edge stuff to be able to, you know, look at these sorts of things.
Yes, L2s is like certainly a hot topic of research. It's not at the top of the priority list right now because there's a lot of other things going on, but it's on our minds at Edge and Node, no doubt.
Cool. Anybody else want to comment on layer 2 for Graph Mainnet?
I think it doesn't only influence indexers, but it also has an influence on delegators on the network. When I see in the server people who are delegating like $100 worth of GRT and who have to pay maybe $20 in gas fees, who never really have a chance of making it back. So I think it's also something to keep in mind, that it's also influencing delegators and may even prevent delegators with lower stacks of GRT from ever delegating to the network.
Yeah, that's a
very good point.
It's not even just that, but if you think about it, if indexers are forced to bear these costs, that's eventually going to make its way down to delegators in what they charge in their cuts.
Yeah,
and like big indexes don't really care about that anyway, so they will drive up their, like, smaller indexes who have to bump their cuts percent, and the other indexes don't really care.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left. So I would like to open this up. If there anybody who has any grants in the pipeline at the moment that they are working on, that they've gone through the interview for, that they'd like to discuss briefly in the last 5 minutes?
Well, I could discuss something that I'm working on, if you want
Please
to
do.
hear about it. So basically, it's really just a short teaser because we are working at it right now. It's a work in progress in the early stages. It's nothing that's ready yet to be publicly announced, but I think this round is ideal for throwing the idea out there and to getting some first feedback from some heavy users in the network who are actively participating in governance, are actively participating as indexers in the network. So basically right now, what Jim, Cohen, Payne, and I are working on is the Graph Academy. So basically the problem is that everyone writes their own documentation over at GitHub or somewhere else on Medium. For example, Cohen writes his own documentation in the GitHub repo, Payne is writing his own, and then we also have the official documentation from the Graph, which is over at the official website and also over at GitHub. And I believe in the future this problem will only increase because we have so many new people coming into the community. So what the problem is, it's really a pain to dig up all the documentation from all these different sources. And I think it's really tiresome to keep up with everything that is thrown in there and keep up with everything new in the network. And we've also seen in the Graph ecosystem, especially in the last weeks or something, that we had the challenge of onboarding a wide variety of really new community members with most different backgrounds, knowledge backgrounds. Some members who are comfortable in using MetaMask, other members who were not at all comfortable in using MetaMask to delegate. And you just have to look at the Discord. It's really tough to answer questions for the 10th or even the 30th time, because it's always the same question. And if you've been there, you really know what I mean. And it was really tough to getting all these answers or getting all helping all people to get answers to their questions. So what we are working at right now is an extensive community-driven knowledge base and an open source library that is full of resources for developers, but also for network participants like indexers and delegators and other stakeholder groups. And what we are envisioning with this project is to basically build a single go-to resource for essential information about the Graph protocol, so that every kind of information that is out there, flowing out there in the internet, is in one platform, easily accessible, and you just have to visit this platform and you can contribute, you can read the docs, you have all this information available. And this kind of information could range from technical documentation like Jim is writing, like Cohen is writing, like Payne is writing, but also extensive tutorials for newcomers to the network, like delegators who absolutely have no idea about the network, who struggle with delegating, who even have problems with the most basic terms. So to give them an overview about the entire ecosystem. And we could make tutorials for delegators, but also interactive coding exercises for developers. So this would also address people who are not interested in investing or interested in indexing, but people who are really interested in building dApps on the protocol. And obviously, as I already mentioned, this could also include documentation from authority figures within the community. And this was really just a quick teaser about what we are working on. And what I really want to emphasize is that what we are envisioning this is to be a community initiative for the community and by the community. So what this means is that everyone is really welcome to contribute to this project, and we would absolutely love to see key figures in the community joining us in building this platform. So basically that's about it. I'm just throwing the idea into there, and you will definitely hear more about this in the future when we are ready to announce something, but it would be interesting to get the first feedback from you guys about this project.
So we're up on the hour, so just very quickly, I see Nilay as mentioned that there's another initiative going on with the Graftronauts on Telegram. Were you aware of that, Stefan?
No, actually I'm not. What I heard about the Graftronauts is that it is some kind of channel where we have prize discussions, so this was what I was hearing about that channel, but I'm not over there.
Yeah. Okay, so what might be worth doing next week is if we can get some of the leaders on who are involved in the Graftronauts group onto this call. Maybe if you were to present what you're proposing with the academy and what you've got already as an MVP, Stefan, for maybe 15 minutes. Okay, well, Nilay is one of them. Perfect. Then sharing the knowledge and seeing if there's collaboration to be done there. But definitely for next week, Chris on L2 and Stefan, you on the Graph Academy. A couple of presentations if you're up for that.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thanks everyone for your time. We're out of time by a minute here. Thanks to everybody who has contributed, and we'll see you again next week.
Good.
See ya.